What's going on, YouTube? So a lot of people have been asking me when to run crit and when not to run crit, or the new non-crit modules on Descendants. So I have Freyna here as a prime example. Freyna is one of the Descendants in the game where running the non-crit modules on her is a good idea. And this comes down to one reason. Right here you have the critical hit rate of 5%. This 5% is abysmally low, so you really shouldn't go running crit on a Descendant if there's an option for more damage, which there is. The new way of running a non-crit is almost all of the builds have power increase on them. You used to not equip power increase on any build because it was just inferior to the attribute module. But since the non-crit modules come with an additional attribute module, here we have toxic amplification, the power increase ends up multiplying the toxic amplification instead of just having two toxics stacked on top of each other. Here's a thought experiment. So we have two pencils here. These would represent our attribute and power increase module. If we've used two attribute modules, we would just have one really long pencil. But instead, if we have one pencil multiplying the other pencil, we get extra pencil. And if I were to run crit on Freyna, I would only end up with a 15% critical hit rate and a 4x damage multiplier. The 4x damage multiplier isn't really that good because you're only doing it 15% of the time. 0.15 times your critical hit damage multiplier minus 1 is how much damage you're adding to your Descendant. So here I'm adding 3 critical hit damage 0.15% of the time, so that's a 45% damage increase for running the 4 critical hit modules. Of course, this changes whenever you have critical hit damage and critical hit rate multipliers, such as Luna buff. And then we have what I would call a mid-range Descendant. So here we have Bunny. Bunny sports a critical hit rate of 10%, so 10% is basically the threshold when running crit is up to you. You can run crit, you cannot run crit. You'll get more consistent damage through not crit output, and you'll just see higher numbers sometimes with the crit output. I run Crit Bunny because I like Crit Bunny. The only real difference between non-crit Bunny and Crit Bunny is that whenever you're running Crit Bunny, sometimes you'll run into a Void Intercept boss with an extremely high crit resist, like Deathstalker or Gluttony. They have around 60 to 70. And inside of dungeons, this really isn't a problem. Some of the commanders, they do have crit resistance a little bit, but not enough to sway the decision one way or the other. Crit does a little bit more damage than non-crit, but like I said, some enemies have crit resistance, so it really balances out. The decision essentially is just up to dealer's choice what they want. I will have to say running non-crit can save you the space on one module, because in order to get up to the damage of crit, you do have to run a spear and shield. But if you run a spear and shield on the crit, you're still doing more damage than the non-crit, but you end up having to use like 7 slots for that, so it's not really worth it. And then on the end of the spectrum, with crit being almost mandatory, we have Descendants similar to Viessa and Luna. Both of these are crit damage Descendants. So with the 3 critical hit rate modules, emergency measures, skill, insight, and front lines, she will sport a 46% critical hit rate. If you have a good reactor, this becomes 50%, so you are in fact critting 50% of the time, which is wild. So if you're critting half the time, why wouldn't you run crit? Because whenever you stack up to the critical hit damage multiplier of 4 without the damage being on the reactor, you're dealing a 2 times multiplier of damage. So you end up walking away with a lot more damage in crit than you would otherwise. You can see a ton of numbers on here are just going to be orange all the time because of how high the crit is. And then there are special case Descendants. The only special case Descendants in the game right now are Noise Surge Luna, Balbi, Haley, and Blair. The reason I say these are special case Descendants is because whenever you activate certain skills and or modules, you get a massive critical hit rate on your Descendant. Right here, if I have a critical hit rate reactor on the Supply Moisture build on Balbi, I am getting the 84% critical hit whenever I am in a puddle of water. So that is why Supply Moisture is the best mod for Valby, because whenever you build for crit, you can do massive damage. Anyway, I hope that helped a lot of people out there who don't know when to run crit for their Descendant, or wondered why there was no Viessa non-crit builds out there. Just because non-crit Viessa is inferior to crit Viessa, you're losing around 30% of your damage not running crit. And this is just average damage. You also don't get to see giant 3 million number pop up on the screen whenever you cast Blizzard. So, who doesn't want to see 3 million on a cold snap? Of course, you could just play Haley, you know, shoot your sniper rifle. I live stream on Twitch if you're interested in that. Check out the link in the description. Check out my YouTube channel if you like the way I do content. Consider subscribing. Y'all have a sick day and peace out.